What's up, you guys? It's Graham here, and things are about to get absolutely insane. In the middle of a 90-day tariff pause, record-high economic uncertainty, and the increasing likelihood of an upcoming recession, as of a few hours ago, the Federal Reserve decided to once again pause interest rate cuts, despite public threats from Trump. And this time, it's about to have a major impact on pretty much all things money. For instance, in just the last few weeks, we've seen chaos erupt over the potential firing of Jerome Powell, pushback from China over rising tariffs, increasing prices on everyday items, and the potential start of a brand new bull market in what's now being called the global reset. This is why we absolutely have to talk about exactly what's happening, what Trump and Jerome Powell just had to say, when interest rates are most likely going to come back down, and what this means for everybody watching. Because like it or not, there's a lot going on beneath the surface that you need to be made aware of. But before we start, as usual, if you appreciate the breaking news videos like this, where we just cover the facts and data, and that's it would mean the world to me if you hit the like button or subscribed if you haven't done that already. I know I hate asking for it too, but it does make a huge difference for the entire channel. And as a thank you for doing that, I will do my best to read and reply to as many of your comments as I can. So thanks so much, and also big thank you to Policy Genius for sponsoring this video, but more on that later. Alright, so first we need to address the elephant in the room that everyone is probably curious about, and that would be firing Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve. See, a few weeks ago, Jerome Powell, who's the head of the Federal Reserve, said that they're going to be holding off from cutting interest rates anytime soon because tariffs could have an inflationary impact on prices throughout our economy. And since their goal is to maintain economic stability without sending inflation back to the moon, they want to take a slower, more data-driven approach and then see how things play out before agreeing to cut interest rates, which is exactly the opposite of what Donald Trump wants. This is why Trump went on record to say that Powell's termination cannot come fast enough. With these costs trending down so nicely, there could be almost no inflation, but there can be a slowing of the economy, unless Mr. Too Late, a major loser, lowers interest rates now. However, even though Trump later backtracked from some of those statements, his reasoning is pretty simple. Lower interest rates could help offset some of the impacts that tariffs have on our economy. But in terms of firing Jerome Powell, it doesn't appear as though Trump has the authority to do so. Except that might soon change. How? Well, as of recently, Jerome Powell said that we're not removable, except for cause. What we do is strictly without consideration of political or any extraneous factors, meaning there needs to be a clear reason for the firing other than just a disagreement over interest rate policy. Although there is now precedent that Trump is allowed to remove independent board members as ruled by the Supreme Court. So there is a chance that eventually Trump could get his way, albeit unlikely. And that's probably for the best. That's because many economists argue that if a president has the power to influence the Federal Reserve, trust in our markets would decline, because this would confirm that anything could be easily manipulated to get whatever outcome they want. So as of now, an independent Federal Reserve is likely the best to achieve market stability and higher prices in the long term, which then brings me to my next point of tariffs. On April 9th, Trump issued a temporary 90-day pause that reduced tariffs on all imports to just 10%. The thinking is that this would be enough time for other countries to begin making deals, and if they don't by the time that July 8th rolls around, then the original tariffs would go back into effect. So far, we've yet to see any confirmed deals, and this is most evident with China, who is the only country not to get a tariff exemption. In fact, upon the announcement that they were the only country excluded from a 90-day deal, they retaliated by implementing a 125% tariff on the United States, after the United States implemented a 145% tariff on China. And as of a few days ago, items under $800 will also be subject to these additional costs, closing a loophole that allowed mom-and-pop sellers to ship low-cost items without a financial impact. This is said to potentially raise the base cost of a $10 t-shirt all the way to $24.50, effectively just passing on the additional cost to the customer. Of course, in terms of where we currently stand, it really just depends on who you listen to. For example, the White House just recently said that China tariffs will come down substantially and that they're actively in talks, but China went on record to say that they're open to talks and that if the US wants to talk, it should show its sincerity and be prepared to correct its wrong practices and cancel the unilateral tariffs. But hey, you know what, at least on the bright side, China did just recently waive tariff exemptions on US ethane imports along with a variety of other products that their country needs to function. And there are many other trade deals expected to go through that are going really well any day now. We just have to be patient. Any minute. Oh, here's one. just waiting on the country's leaders. Anyway, all of this waiting and uncertainty is leading to the potential of one more spooky economic boogeyman, and that would be a recession. According to CNN, market fear is still near an all-time high, with 66% of adults saying they're pessimistic or afraid of the economy, and 69% saying that they consider an economic recession to be at least somewhat likely in the next year. And if you think that's not possible, the data is already showing that this is becoming a reality. For example, the CEO of BlackRock just said that many business leaders fear the US economy is already in a recession, and if conditions don't change, it could take another month until we start seeing empty shelves. That's because shipping times between China and the United States often take about 1 to 2 months, and as one economist said, container ships to US ports come to a stop in mid to late May. Layoffs in trucking and retail start shortly after, and by summer, recession. Of course, critics of this say that empty shelves are overly dramatic because many companies have pre-bought inventory to weather a storm, and that recession fears are simply going to be a detox period for the economy. But no matter what you believe, this does have the potential to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if people believe there's going to be a recession, they're going to cut back on things, which inadvertently causes the recession that they were fearing in the first place. Although in terms of what Jerome Powell just said, as well as what this means for the stock market, the housing market, and your own finances, here's what you need to hear. Although with the Federal Reserve once again holding firm this month, it's not a surprise that investors are looking for a place to park their money. After all, it seems like we're navigating a series of just economic uncertainty. That's why when it comes to protecting your financial future, it's not just about where you invest, but also making sure your loved ones are covered in the event something were to happen to you. And that is where our sponsor, Policy Genius, is there to help. For those unaware, Policy Genius makes it easy to compare life insurance policies from top providers in just a few clicks so that you could find the coverage that fits your needs and budgets, all online with no phone calls required. This is especially important because life insurance is not a one-size-fits-all product, so Policy Genius doesn't treat it like one. They lay out all of your options clearly, from coverage amounts, prices, and terms, leaving you with no guesswork, just clarity. In fact, with Policy Genius, you could find life insurance policies that start at just $276 a year for $1 million of coverage. It's an easy way to protect the people you love and feel really good about the future. On top of that, their team of licensed award-winning agents work for you and not the insurance company, so they don't have any incentive to recommend one insurer over the other. They'll just walk you through the entire process step by step, handle all the paperwork, and help you make decisions with confidence, with thousands of 5-star reviews on both Google and Trustpilot. That's why you should get started today, because the sooner you start, the less expensive it is, since policies tend to get more expensive as you get older. Just head to policygenius.com/Graham or click the link in the description to get free life insurance quotes from top companies and see how much you could save. Again, the link is down below in the description to get started. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the video. Alright, now before we talk about what Jerome Powell just said and his warning for the economy, we gotta talk about another topic that everybody is wondering about, and that would be the stock market. After all, despite seeing some of our worst single-day point losses ever in history, for the most part, the stock market has completely recovered, having risen consistently for over a week straight. So even though the volatility certainly isn't over, there are some signs that we could look to that might show us where prices could be heading over the next year. And that brings me to a special metric called the breadth thrust indicator. This analyzes sudden market movements to determine the beginnings of a brand new bull market. And since 1945, it has been correct all 14 out of 14 times, with average gains of 24.6% over the following 11 months. Well, guess what recently just happened? That's right, the other week, the breadth thrust indicator was officially confirmed, and if history is any indication, this could be the start of a brand new bull market, with prices moving higher 100% of the time so far. Although I say that with a quick word of caution. Even though this has been accurate over the last 80 years, every situation and every market's going to be different. And right now we're dealing with a unique set of circumstances that's not playing out the same as it has been in the past. Of course, this isn't to say that we've not started a brand new bull market, but it is about a warning of setting unrealistic expectations. Because as we've seen in the past, all it takes to tank the market is a few offhand remarks that sends investors into a panic, and that has to be taken into consideration. On top of that, there's also massive uncertainty around tariffs, which are scheduled to go back into effect early July if deals aren't made, slowing corporate earnings, which have yet to be realized, and overall forecasts that have been revised substantially downward. Although some analysts believe that a trade deal with China is all it would take to send us back to all-time highs, and if interest rates go lower at the same time, that could push us up even further further. So what effect would this have on the housing market? Well, here's where things are getting really interesting. Year over year, home prices posted a 3.9% annual increase in February. And even though that sounds like another monumental increase, the data shows that things are beginning to slow down. In fact, on a month-over-month basis, national home prices have only increased just 0.1%, signaling that maybe things are beginning to normalize. Although do keep in mind, this is the average across the country, and some locations are doing way better or way worse. For example, New York saw a 7.7% increase from a year ago, Chicago saw 7%, and Cleveland saw 6.6% compared to Tampa, which declined 1.5%. But overall, the housing market has been fairly resilient, despite 70% of Americans believing that now is a bad time to buy. On top of that, Zillow just went on record to say that they think home prices will actually be negative for the year, falling 1.9% for the first time since the Great Financial Crisis. Or as they say, the combination of rising available listings and elevated mortgage rates is signaling potential price drops by year's end. Buyers are gaining more options and time to decide, and sellers are cutting prices to attract bids. Essentially, from their perspective, buyers are holding out longer than sellers are remaining patient, and that's causing the tables to turn. Obviously, a 1.9% drop isn't groundbreaking, but it is news that there can be room to negotiate depending on the market. Now, personally, just from what I've seen, it does appear as though people are tightening up their savings, scaling back on discretionary purchases, and building up a rainy day fund just because they don't know what's going to happen within the economy. This definitely means that less money is spent right now on housing, but it also means that if our economy continues doing well, some of those rainy day funds could find their way back into the housing market if and when interest rates do eventually come back down. Obviously, time will tell how this part plays out, but in terms of what Jerome Powell just said and the future for the rest of the year, here is what you came for. Like I just mentioned, a few hours ago, Jerome Powell reiterated that they would not be lowering interest rates and instead would take a data-driven approach to the point that they would only lower rates when they are certain that inflation is not going to be going above their 2% target. After all, they believe that tariffs could be inflationary. It's too early to tell how it's going to play out, and the last thing they want to do is lower interest rates, inflation returns, and then they have to raise rates back up before it's too late. On top of that, the Federal Reserve pointed out that the jobs market is very strong. And this is incredibly important to them because the economy, from their perspective, doesn't need to be saved, and a lot of people are doing just fine. Of course, in terms of when they plan to lower interest rates, they didn't give us a clear timeline, but they did mention that they're open to lowering interest rates when the time is right and when the economy is more stable, or when they start to see weakness in the jobs market or consumer spending. Realistically, this probably is not going to happen until July or September at the very soonest. But even then, the situation changes on a minute-by-minute basis. Even when I'm filming and editing this video, things are happening that's changing the entire situation. And that's why it's hard to give any sort of answer without just giving an educated guess. Although in terms of what I think of this, here you go. Personally, I don't see them lowering interest rates anytime soon, but then again, stranger things have happened. Like, even though 90% of Americans believe that tariffs are inflationary, some economists argue that they won't have an impact beyond this year, and you could still lower interest rates without wreaking havoc on the economy. Honestly, all of this is really above my pay grade as some dude on YouTube making videos in a half-converted garage, but my philosophy at the end of the day is just this. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another sell-off, just like I wouldn't be surprised if the market continues to rally on the promise of a trade agreement with China. To me, it's really a 50-50 coin flip if the market goes up or goes back down, and that's why I'm taking the approach of just buying into the markets on a regular basis, regardless of where it trades at. I know it sounds stupid, but the first thing I do every single morning is open up my phone and buy into the markets. I buy US equities, international stocks, and the Bitcoin ETF, and then I wait and do it all again the next day. This way, if the market moves down, great, I get to buy in even cheaper. And if it moves higher, great, I'm capturing some of the upside too. I'm not going to pretend I know what's going to happen here, but I will do my best to bring you the most up-to-date news as possible. And if you want to be a part of that, make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that already. Like I said, it's totally free, it takes you a split second, and I will do my best to get these videos out as fast as possible. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time.